Hey everyone, welcome to Season 2 of No Time Like Joe Time. Before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to put a couple things out there. First, if you could like, subscribe, and comment, that is super helpful. I love doing this media. I love having people think deeper about the shows we watch and thinking about how we see ourselves in this media. So that is super helpful. Second, if you want to be a guest on the show, because that is the heartbeat of this podcast, YouTube channel is guests. If you are interested in becoming a guest, email me at notimelikejoetime@gmail.com. Love to have you on. Anyone is welcome, so don't hesitate to reach out. Think about what your favorite TV show is, and we'll have a conversation about a couple clips. But really excited to get this episode going with Don. He is an absolute gem and wonderful guy. Check the show notes about where you can find him. And let's get started. Welcome to No Time Like Joe Time, where we use our brilliant brains to analyze TV clips, to deep dive, to find life lessons and equations to this thing we call life. I bring on a new guest to help me equate different takes. And this week, I am honored to have a guest who is the president of Achieve New Heights. He's also an executive coach, and he's just an all-around good guy. Please welcome Don Gleason.
Hey, thank you very much, Joe. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. And actually, Don, I'm just so glad you're here. You are just the guy I was hoping to see. What are the odds we'd run into each other now?
Well, I have to admit, thanks, but we did schedule to meet at this time, and so we've planned it out pretty good, I think.
I know, right? Like one in a million.
You're right. Yeah. So, what's going on?
Well, so I know you're, an executive coach, and you kind of work with people with jobs. Well, I'm working on transitioning into a new career.
Awesome. That is really cool. So where are you at now in terms of where are you going next, right? It's always good to go to something.
Yeah. So right now I fight bears in the woods. I'm looking to move into a scientist who works with relatives, psychics, and spaghetti theory.
Wow. We're going to have a lot of stuff to unpack if we talk about those. First, your job right now is to fight bears in the woods. Why are you doing that?
Oh, that's not a job. It's more of a hobby. My real job is a bear conservative.
So you were saying you wanted to be a scientist who moves into relativity, psychics, and spaghetti theory. That's spaghetti theory. Do you mean relativity, physics, and string theory? Kind of like Sheldon in the Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
Okay.
But I wanted to run a few things past you because I was asked to take an IQ test, and I wanted to show you my answers because I'm surprised I got a high score. So here are some questions I got right.
Okay.
So this first one was super easy. I mean, it was obvious. I mean, I like to move it. The second one was a little weird, but I managed to defend my answer, I think, pretty well. And let's see.
Okay.
In this question here for this one with Alice, it seemed kind of insensitive to me, but I got it. And then finally, this was a really tough space question, but I nailed it, I think. They are all planets. They are all around, and none of them have McDonald's on it. I mean, I don't think anything could be more truer.
At least not yet, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I wonder how long it'll be before we have McDonald's on Neptune.
Well, as much as I get McDonald's, I'm hoping in the next year. So not to brag, but I got a gentleman's 45 for the IQ test.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's out of 50. So pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean,
it says, I don't know if that's true though.
Oh, well,
is 45 out of 50 good? I mean, is that?
Well, I mean, I got in a high range of primates. I scored higher than most monkeys, stupid monkeys. The only one who beat me, and I really can't compete with this. I mean, he was a chimp in a diaper. Who can stand against that?
Yeah, those chimps are tough. I guess probably nobody.
Exactly. The only thing I regret is inviting him to move in with me.
That could be a
Yeah.
detective.
Have you ever had an IQ test?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever taken an IQ test. I've done a lot of personality assessments with the Myers-Briggs and the
Yeah.
DISC and Strength Finders, but I've never done like an IQ test.
What's your favorite personality test?
I have to say it's the one that I'm certified as a consultant in, which is the DISC. And it just, because I've studied it, it really means a lot to me and I really know it well. And I'm constantly applying it. I watch myself during the day and I was like, oh, that was my I, or that was my C, or that was my S, right?
Yeah.
And each one of those come out in different ways.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like I feel like personality tests are a really great tool, but you have to use the tool properly?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because
And the first part of that
yeah,
is they're not tests, right? You can't pass or fail.
that's a good point.
It's an assessment.
Yeah.
It just talks about your personality and how how your personality shows up in
Yeah.
your behavior. So
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And I had one. It was insights, and
okay.
they have like 4 colors breakdown. And so when I did it at the time, I was in management. I was a production warehouse manager.
Okay.
And what we found out was like it's green and yellow, which is very caring and very outgoing.
There you go.
And I was like, I really like working with teams. I don't like the, other part of it, which is like, the nitty gritty, like budgeting and all that stuff. And through this, I kind of realized, oh, I want to move into a different direction. Now I'm a peer support specialist. So I work with people who are in recovery and use my recovery story to help support them. And it's just like, it's a perfect fit. So it was like using a great tool. So that's really cool. Do you ever have people you see a lot of potential in, but they get like in their head or don't think they assume like, oh, I'm going to get stuck or can't do it?
All the time.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, fear, resistance, self-confidence, self-worth. Oh yeah, it happens all the time. And even to some of the smartest people. And they think that they're well beyond that. But the fact is we're humans. Yeah. And because we're humans, we have all these emotions. In fact, it's the human mind trying to protect us a lot, right? The mind keeps us from doing things. It's like going up onto the top of an Empire State Building and jumping, right? Most of us were like, the fear would overtake us and there's no way.
Yeah.
So what we do is we justify, I'll put a backpack on, a parachute on. Yeah. Right. And I'll make sure there's not enough wind and all those different factors. I'll make sure there's people down below, or maybe I'll make sure somebody's taking all the police away so they don't catch me. But what's interesting is when you do it for that first time, the second time is so much easier. I was a fire marshal at a base up in Montana when I was a squadron commander. Yeah. And part of that is we had to go to fire marshal school. And what we do is we rappel off the top of a 3-story building. And the first time I went, and I'm scared of heights. I'm 6'5" and I'm scared of heights.
Oh, wow.
So I come off the first time and I'm just kind of inching across and I start going down that thing and I was like, this is so cool. we got down to the bottom and we ran up those 3 flights of stairs and we were fighting each other up the stairs to get an opportunity to do it again.
Oh my gosh.
It was so much fun. But it's a great analogy of what you just talked about. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. I can definitely relate to that. There's so many things that like, I'm like, this seems terrifying. And then once you jump into it, it's like, oh, this is great. For me, it was roller coasters, terrified of roller coasters most of my life. And I'm like, no. And my brother was like, just go on one. And if you don't like it, I'll never ask you to go on another one. I was like, okay. And I jumped on it. I loved it. And I was kind of talking to you about this. I'm more like, up-to-date version is for a long time, whenever I go job hunting,
Mhm.
I would make the decision if I was qualified. I'd be like, no, I can't get that job. Oh, maybe I could get that job. And I often would try to find jobs. I don't know what the best way to say this, but I'd go for jobs I knew I was like overqualified for, because that
Okay.
felt like less chance of getting rejected.
Yeah. Okay.
But once I finally came up, I heard this on a podcast, somebody saying my goal was to get 100 no's from companies.
Mhm.
And if I got 100 no's, I do something great. So I was like, oh, I'm going to apply at, Medtronic
Mhm.
or Boston Scientific or here. And
Mhm.
I started getting interviews, and I was like, what the heck? So pushing myself out of that in your head and
Yep.
not making assumptions was good.
Yep.
So it reminds me of a Big Bang Theory clip where Leonard does some assumption,
Mhm.
and so we'll look at that clip right now, and we'll debrief on it after.
Oh, Stuart.
You're not going to answer it?
He wants to talk about Penny. I don't want to talk about Penny.
You're making an assumption. Perhaps the comic book store is on fire. He needs your assistance.
Why would he call me?
We don't know. And if you don't answer the phone, we can't know.
I'm not answering the phone, Sheldon.
Answer the phone, Leonard.
No! There, it went to voicemail.
Aren't you going to check your messages?
I like that. Sheldon's like a dog on a bone, man. He's not gonna let it go.
I know. And that guy's such a good actor, just his face and just
Yep.
have you ever felt like Sheldon in this, where you're like, opportunity is calling,
Mhm.
answer it.
Yep. Oh yeah, and what's interesting, we were just talking about personality assessments,
Yeah.
right? And I'm an SC, which is S is very teamwork and collaborative, but C is very compliant and analytical, and they're almost exactly identical in terms of height,
Yeah.
intensity. So when you talk about Sheldon with that, he's very compliant. The phone rings, you answer it. There's a voicemail, you answer it. You don't question it. You have to do it, right? So
Yeah.
there's a part of me when I go into situations like that I have to follow, right? So what I had to do, this is why it's kind of funny for me, is what I have to do is turn off on the phone, turn off the ringer, silence
Mm,
it. I turn off the ding for the texts. I turn off the, even on my computer,
yeah.
emails and stuff come in. I don't get a ding. I don't
Yeah.
want the ding, right? I don't want to be Pavlov's dog, have to go over to the
Yeah.
email, And sometimes that gets me because my wife, she'll be out somewhere and she'll send me a text and she's like, "Didn't you get my text? You get everybody else's." I'm like, I don't get anybody's until I
Yeah.
look, right? I just don't do it.
Yeah.
And it's part of managing your time. So yeah, Sheldon, that piece inside of me is there, and I have to be very careful.
Yeah.
I have to go to my email 3 or 4 times a day just
Yeah.
to see what's there, and that's exactly Sheldon, right? That's why I love
Yeah.
this so much. He's 4 nerds and a girl,
Yeah.
and the girl's probably the smartest one,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I like that whole point of like, that's a view I didn't have of like Sheldon's like, no, there's a process.
Mhm.
Here's what you're breaking process. And actually that kind of makes sense with a lot where Sheldon gets frustrated, is he's
Mhm.
looking at it through a process. Like, this is how things should go. This makes sense. And
Mhm.
actually, where I can, now that you say that, where I can relate to, one of my favorite things to do is I love public speaking.
Oh, cool.
Love it. I like, my dream would be like, we're in a stadium full of 50,000 people and somebody's like, "Hey, do you want to come up and just talk for 5 minutes?" I'm like, yeah, I do. And I
That would scare the pants off most people.
yeah, exactly. But the reason why I like it so much is I understand the script. I go
Oh, there
up,
you go.
I talk, I have a
Mhm.
set limit. I know when to be done. I have my intro, my body, and then my
Mhm.
end. I get that. And for a long time, I struggled with interpersonal conversations because I didn't
Ah,
always understand the script. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
how long should I talk for? Are they wanting to go and I just don't know
Mhm.
it? What do I do? Do I just leave? Do I say goodbye? And like that stuff like really scared me because I just didn't know how to handle it.
Mhm.
And I was
Mhm.
kind of in between both Sheldon and Leonard, between like, I know what they're going to talk about, or
Mhm.
what if they tell me I'm on fire and I'm the worst?
Yeah.
So just kind of like, so I get that point from Sheldon. I
Yeah.
never had that angle.
Yeah.
Do you think any of that was like, oh, this is our friend, we should answer our friend? I mean, I guess that's kind of part of it.
Oh, don't your friends call you sometimes and you say, I'm just not ready for that conversation? And that's where Leonard was, right?
Yes.
Have you had that before?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I know
Yeah.
I've had times where actually I think what kind of a good example is for this, where so I had a friend, he was asking me if I wanted to be a part of this group. And I
Mhm.
just kept forgetting to get back to him over and over and over again. And then he was calling me and I was like, oh no. All right. At first I almost didn't answer it, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to answer it. I'll let him get mad. And so I answered it and he goes, I am so sorry. I hope I wasn't pushing too hard on that. I didn't mean to keep going. If you don't want to do it, it's totally okay. But I'm sorry if I was pressuring you. And I was like, that is not how I thought the conversation would go. Like, and I was like,
That's
no,
right.
I felt so bad. I
Mhm.
wasn't responding and I mean to.
Mhm. Yep. I'm in the middle of I'm on a team helping an individual raise $150,000 for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And there's 10 of us, so each of us are trying to get about $15,000. And I sent out emails to a lot of my connections that were in the Air Force with me. I stayed in touch with them. We see each other on a monthly basis at different meetings here in San Antonio or other places. And and I've probably gotten 10 or 15% who have responded.
Yeah.
So I was at a meeting last night and I said, hey, I was talking to somebody one of their bosses that I was trying to get a hold of. I said, hey, is he been around? Right. And you start wondering on the other side are they
Yeah.
ignoring my call because it's a fundraiser call? Right. And in reality, what happens a lot of time is I knew for a fact the first time I sent it, he was traveling. And that first email gets buried quickly. You get 50, 100 emails a day. Boy, by the time he gets back, it's 400 down.
Yeah.
So I sent him out again, and then I sent a third time, right, just to try to get him on top.
Yeah.
And I periodically get another 2-3% that are responding, but you
Yeah.
just got to keep sending them. And
That's
in your
good.
inside your head, you'll tell yourself, right, that fear and that lack of confidence and stuff. Like, hey, I'll make up a story, right? Look at what Sheldon was doing. Sheldon was making up a story. The comic book store might be on fire. Well, the comic book store is like almost the favorite place of
Yeah.
Sheldon besides the train store. So of course he's thinking it's going to be destroyed. And Leonard knows that because you go back to the first episode when Leonard saw Penny and met her, he said, quote, our kids are going to be beautiful and smart.
Yeah.
And his whole purpose in the show is to date and get married to her and have kids, right? And so now Stuart is threatening his desire, and he wanted to go out. They weren't dating. Sheldon, Leonard and Penny were not dating, so Stuart asked if he could go out with her. Leonard, I keep getting the names wrong. Leonard said sure, and they went out. But Stuart was asking for some advice of how to. Does he kiss her? Does he hold her hand? What is she like? And he's like, I'm not going to give you any hints. Hello?
Right.
No way.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no way that he wanted to take that phone call. So it's interesting, the dichotomy between Leonard and Sheldon in that situation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point. I kind of forgot the context of that, but now I'm like, oh, I do remember. Really quick, I was going to say, I so appreciate you with that work with like leukemia. My stepdad was diagnosed with leukemia.
Oh, really?
Actually, it was 2 years ago, and he was given like a 3 to 6 month life sentence, but he's still around.
All right.
He just completely beat the odds, and it's in remission. But it's something very close to my heart. We try to do like leukemia walks and all that stuff. So when you said that, I was just like, oh, you're a saint.
Well, if you have any contacts up there who would like to donate money to that, because
Yeah.
that's what we want to do is more people who get, because it's like every 180 seconds, somebody
Yeah.
gets diagnosed with a blood cancer in the United States.
Yeah.
And that's just way too much. So they're
Yeah.
doing research, they're developing medicines, they're helping people with equipment,
Yeah.
they're helping, was it some number, 42% of people who get blood cancer, they end up using all of their financial wherewithal by the time they're done. So it depletes their savings. So they stand there and they help in between of that. So you don't become cancer free and have nothing left and be homeless, right?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
tough. Yeah, they've definitely experienced that where I mean
Good.
he was a doctor, so he was very good at managing money, had a lot of money, but so yeah, I
appreciate that.
Yeah, so
I just praise God that he's doing well.
yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. Amen. And so I'm going to put this right here, audience. I'll have it in the show notes. If you want to donate, go to the link now, send it. There are a lot of people out there who are dealing with this, and
if this comes out before the 6th of June, I'll give you my link and they can donate so it comes back to our team since we brought it forward. But if nothing else, go to leukemialls.org and donate there. It all goes to the same place, right? This is just our competition is just ways to push in. What was it 9-week program to try to raise more money? But
I'll
go to
change
the same place.
That sounds good. I'll change the order. I'll put this out right away in June.
Okay.
We get that on time.
I may reference our conversation in my social media posts. That's great.
Oh, sweet. So I'm curious too, like when you were sending these emails and was there any positive reinforcement you would try to do or working with people like what's your thought on positive reinforcement? And if it's something you're like, yeah, I believe in it, how do you live that out?
Well, that's a good question. So part of the positive reinforcement is I'm trying to reach into their emotional pocket, right? Just like a story with you, right? Like you just said, right? If I talked about, imagine your dad all of a sudden going to the doc because he feels like he's just a little bit under the weather and he finds out he's got leukemia and he's got 3 to 6 months to live. How would you feel? What would you end up doing to help your dad, right? Yeah. Imagine if it was one of your kids. Right, there's some stories on the website where kids are like 8 years old, and they go get ready for Christmas break, and they're just not feeling good, and the next thing they know, they're in a coma, and they're being helicoptered to a hospital hundreds of miles away because that's where the treatment is, and it's 3 weeks later when the rest of the kids are back in school, they're still in the hospital in a coma, and that would, if you were the parents. You would not. You'd take all your sick leave and you would be there at the bed, doing whatever you could, and that would so disrupt your life. So, and not that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing in terms of you're going to do what it takes for your kids. It's not a good thing that they got blood cancer.
Right.
That's a bad thing. It's a good thing that you will drop whatever it takes because it's more important. Yeah. And so, trying to reach into people's emotional pocket a little bit.
Yeah, and, that's good. I like that, and I just saw a post today on Facebook, which was talking about the best marketing teams. They don't sell product; they sell feelings. So they were like saying like Harley Davidson, they don't sell bikes; they sell a lifestyle. Right. And I can't remember what the other examples were, but it was like, oh yeah, that's absolutely true. So I think, it's. I remember, I mean, much smaller scale. Before I had a pet and people would have pets die and they were so emotional about it. I'm like, what the heck? Why? It's a dog. You get another one. And then I had a pet and that pet died. And I was like, oh.
Heartbroken.
Yeah, this sucks.
Yeah.
So,
when my golden retriever, who was my hunting buddy, she passed away after 12 or 13 years. Boy, I was like mush. I mean, I was just standing there crying. And then I had to realize I had to go to work. It's like, oh, I don't want to go to work.
Oh, exactly.
I just want to go home and curl up.
Yeah.
But
anyway. And it's a beautiful thing. Like I've come to really appreciate people who take it that hard because I think that says a lot about their character and the love they have.
That's right.
So our next clip is kind of with positive reinforcement, and this This episode I remember, and this scene just is one of my favorites. Just cracks me up.
What's this cartoon called again?
Oshikuru Demon Samurai.
And it's not a cartoon, it's anime.
Anime. You know, I knew a girl in high school named Anime. Anime Fletcher. She was born with one nostril. Then she had this bad nose job and basically wound up with 3.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you with.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
Chocolate?
That whole scene just gets me. And like, my boys were younger at the time. And when I watched that, I'm like, I mean, maybe that's not a bad idea. And the things I love the first offer of chocolate. Leonard's like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
And
Like, are you moving into my girl?
yeah. and just, I don't know. It just makes me laugh. For me, one thing I think about with positive reinforcement, I've gotten a lot better at positive self-talk. I used to be really bad at it. A lot of negative thoughts. And so one of the things that I've grown in, when I was younger, anxiety was horrible through the roof. And I would get so anxious about getting my oil change because I thought if I went in, these guys are going to ask me questions and I'm not going to know any of it. And I'm going to look like an idiot, a guy who doesn't know anything about cars. And so I just wouldn't take it in. And it caused car issues. Surprise, surprise. And so finally I started having more positive self-talk. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you don't know a lot about cars. Let's own that right away. Let's make it a little funny. Like, I'll go in, sometimes I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, what kind of car do you have? I'm like, it's red. I know that. And just own it.
It's got 4 wheels.
Yeah. And usually I get them to laugh and they're all like, oh, okay, cool. It's fine. Most people don't know. And so, and then the first time I did that, when I got my oil change, I was also like, okay, after this, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go buy like a game or something. Just say, hey, good job. And so I did it. Everything went great. And now I bring my car in every 6 months. No problem.
You know, you made me think about when I first time we bought a house, we had an air conditioner and we did not have a service contract. And I would put off the maintenance because I was afraid they would come back with some repair that I had no ability to pay for without going into debt, borrowing money. So, but at some point it would start not operating right. So I would have to call them up and they say, you know, if you would have called us 6 months ago, this wouldn't have been that big of a deal. So your waiting cost you hundreds of dollars. So,
exactly.
That's why we do a service contract. And I was like, okay. So when we moved back to San Antonio and bought another house, this is our 3rd house we've owned. We got the service contract. A friend of ours recommended a company and they come out and they don't always find anything when they do the service, but they usually find something. Like this time was some contacts that were starting to short out because they were old contacts. So they replaced them because we had one night, happened to be my in-laws were over It was really warm outside, and all of a sudden the house was heating up. I'm like, what's going on? I just had them. Well, sure enough, the contacts had arced across and shut the system down. It wouldn't start. So we had to pay for the service guy to come out. But luckily, because we had the service contract, we didn't pay the after hours fee. We just paid a regular fee.
Oh, nice.
So, but he had us back operational in about 3 or 4 hours. So it wasn't too bad. But
it's funny how it kind of blends both clips together of like when you make that effort and you do it, there's positive reinforcement of like, I only have to pay this much. Great. Or for me, like going in, like I learned, hey, paying $100 for oil change, lights being changed, all that good stuff is a lot better than $1,000 down the road. And so like that alone is like, I think there's just positive reinforcement for me just doing it, just going out and doing things and like seeing things I never thought I could do.
Yeah.
Like, I never thought I was going to become a manager, but I did.
There you go.
And I would use that a lot to tell people who were interested in moving up in the company, but they're like, I don't know if I could do it. Like, look, I've done it. You can do it. Trust me. And not to diminish myself or to be like, I'm not great. So clearly you can, but in the sense of I was in that boat where you were.
Mm-hmm.
So
when I was in the military, it was similar because when I was a lieutenant and then a captain, when we saw the majors, it was like, wow, I would love to be a major, man. They're like God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you realize you're making majors, like, okay, lieutenant colonels. And that was colonels. Colonels are like gods, man. They run the base. There's only a couple of them on the base. Yeah. And all of a sudden I was a colonel and I was a group commander. And it was like, wow, isn't that interesting how I move forward? So it's just somehow this piece here on positive reinforcement got me because I was thinking about this study I'm going to do here in a couple of weeks. It's a webinar on influence, the power of influence. And I'm thinking about it from the perspective of what I do, which is coaching and career transition coaching. So people who are going through a job search and they're constantly influencing others, not manipulating, not coercing, right? Because what you saw in the clip there with Sheldon was he was almost like manipulating because he was rewarding, like Pavlov's dog, right? He was rewarding good behavior, penalizing bad behavior with that look. So, but that's not what we as leaders do, right? We influence by showing the example, by communicating, by caring, right? We don't manipulate, we don't coerce. So some people don't like the word influence. Sometimes they use inspire, but the idea is the same. Yeah. Right? And as we inspire our people. So imagine if Sheldon had inspired instead of what could be seen as manipulating. Yeah.
I like that. That's really good. I appreciate that mindset. That's something that's always like the job I was a manager at. We had a servant leadership culture. So I was, we flipped leadership upside down and I would go to my employees and be like, what do you guys need? How can I help you succeed?
There you go.
And then give them the resource and let them go.
Yeah.
And they did great things. And so I appreciate that mindset.
Think what was happening just about 4 years ago. So 49 months ago, right? COVID had hit. Companies were had shut down. They didn't know if they were going to survive. They were starting to lay people off. And the great stories were when a boss wouldn't hide in the office and just let people go. He would come out and have a meeting. And I remember one where it was like, there's 20 people in the shop. He says, based upon our projected revenue and how things are going to reduce, we're going to have to let one person go. So I picked the last in is going to be the first one out. And the team all got together and said, is that a final decision? He says, well, I don't see another way. He says, the guy said, well, if we can find another way, would you be open to it? And he said, well, yeah. I mean, I don't want to let the guy go, but to keep the company going, it's like Captain Picard on the Star Trek Enterprise, right? It's about the ship, right? I got to keep the ship going. I'll do whatever it takes to keep the ship operational. He's got to keep the company going. And the team came back and said, what if we all took like a 3-hour cut per week? That would work 20 people. That's like a 40-hour a week person. You save the amount of money, right? Because we're all hourly. Would that be okay? And he
Wow.
says, well, yeah. And the team said, we're willing to do that to keep somebody else employed.
Wow.
We can make this work, right? So it bonded the team together.
Yeah.
The leader looked really like an influential leader because he was open, he was vulnerable, he laid the books out. He said, here's the situation. But I have a friend of mine who was a fractional COO of a company, and the guy literally hid in his office and he managed from email, and they started laying people off, and the company had a huge impact because he wouldn't open up to other ideas. So what a dichotomy of opportunity, right?
Right, exactly. No, that's such a great story. That's so moving. And like, yeah, I think that's what great leaders bring out in people.
That's
Of like I don't think people always well, what I'd always say is I appreciate being a part of that success story. But at the end of the day, it wasn't me. It was them. And I tell that to all like the people I work with when they're making progress and they're making the next big step. And they're like, oh, thank you for all the help. I'm like, yeah, of course, happy to help. But I'm just a footnote in this. You're the main story. It's you. And I felt, one thing I realized is I'm really good at building teams and building connection. And so I love stories like that. And I'm super passionate about like, hey, let's treat people with dignity in the workplace. Even if somebody's not doing great, I would still be like, hey, here's what we need to do. Here's what we need to see, but never treat them different than anybody else in the sense of like respect.
There you go.
So
here's an interesting piece that I'm exploring and dealing with.
Yeah.
So as a career transition coach, right? So many organizations do, and people do exactly what you said. And that's the right thing to do, right? As leaders, it's not about us, it's about the team. But all of a sudden we come around to writing our resume and telling our elevator pitch and telling stories in an interview. And because the belief is it's never us, it's the team, we write about the team. But the next company is not going to hire the team. They're going to hire you. So they want to know what you did. And we, because of our beliefs, are so solid that it's not us.
Yeah.
We can't think differently. We can't write differently. We can't communicate differently. And it becomes a stumbling block in finding that next job. I was working with a guy who wanted to get in with Amazon as a area manager.
Yeah.
And until we convinced him over a year that he had to talk about himself, not the team, he couldn't get employed. Amazon was not going to hire him.
Yeah.
But as soon as he made that switch, boom, he got hired, and he's been there now, I think 3 years.
That's really good.
He's loving it. So it's interesting. And as I work with people, I have to take them back into mindset and understand the words they've used and the words other people have used around them. Because like in the military, and same as a company, you've heard the words, right? We buy it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And we become the values and culture of the company if we stay there for a while. Sometimes we never do, right? There's a lot of people who jump in the military and they just never, they never assimilate, to use a Star Trek term, right?
Yeah.
So when they get out, they're not a military person, so to speak, because they don't have the same values and stuff like that. But if you now have those beliefs that you have to think and you have to reprogram, right? As you advance forward, you learn, but then you have to unlearn and relearn. And that's one of those things we have to do.
I love that so much. I love, right. Reminds me, and I hope you'll appreciate this because you're a military guy. One of my favorite leadership books is Extreme Ownership. And it was written by Navy SEALs. And one story they told is there was this, they were like doing a training, and I think it was something with like canoes or something. And there was this team, this one guy was leading a team. They got first every time. This other group, they were getting last all the time. And the guy was always like, well, it's the team. The team isn't pulling. And so the captain was like, okay, I'm going to have you two switch. So they switched leaders, the first place and the last place. And the guy who was always in first, he knew how to bring the team together, and they ended up getting second place the next time. And so it's just shows that power, and kind of like what you said. I love this line that they're not going to ask you about the team. They're going to ask you about what you did. I think that's so impactful and such a good insight. And I love how it it relates to even this clip where it's like, oh, it's easy just to be like, oh, you did something good. But thinking about what it would have looked like if Sheldon did inspire her. Maybe she would have been the one too who's being like, oh, hey, this is TV time. We all got to be quiet. Okay. And be like advocate for Sheldon. So I just love that whole concept.
Yeah. Amy later on, because she dates Sheldon, they get married. And she says, I'm jealous of Penny. So Penny's the one without a degree, right? She's always had the minimum wage job, but she's the one who can relate, control, communicate with Sheldon better than anyone. And I say control because a lot of times he acts like a kid.
Yeah.
Right. And when they're kids, sometimes you got to control them a little bit. You got to set boundaries and you got to communicate in a certain way. Yeah. So, but she understands that. Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting that here's these PhDs who can't get along with Sheldon because they're too smart. Right? So
yeah, the emotional intelligence.
Yep.
Huge, which I've started to hear more about it. And I'm so excited because I'm like, I feel like I'm emotionally intelligent. So it's great. Yeah. So this is all good stuff. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about?
In terms of the Big Bang?
Yep. Or in general, anything your mind goes to.
I think I like Big Bang because my wife talks about it. It was kind of funny when I graduated college in 82, it was a recession. And I had 454 rejection letters from companies. And I joined the Air Force because I did not want to go back and get a master's. And at the 10-year point, my boss said, you're not going to make major unless you get a master's degree. That was just the standard. So he got me into Air Force Institute of Technology. I got a master's. I made major. And then I went to another school and got another master's, basically. And then I went to a third school and I got another master's. So here I graduate. I retire from the military with 3 master's degrees when I didn't want to get one in the first place. Right? So it's kind of interesting. But so I had a lot of friends who had masters, right? So it's kind of we're engineers, so the nerds, right? The geeks. And that's kind of like Big Bang.
That makes sense.
Here's my wife who's got she didn't get a master's, even a bachelor's degree, but she's really smart. She'd be a great office manager.
Oh,
right?
nice.
She understands people. She understands organization. She loves to sew and to knit and quilt. And she breaks everything down into a project. She knows exactly how the steps that she's got to do, how long it's going to take. And she's always working a number of projects. So she'll work like an hour and a half on this and 2 hours on that and another hour and a half on this every day to keep them moving forward. And I just sit here in awe sometimes like, wow, that's so smart.
It is.
So
that's amazing. Something I'm gonna have to edit because I forgot to ask this right away. I forgot to ask you, what's your history with the Big Bang? And when did you start watching it? And what made you choose this for the show?
I think the reason I picked it was because of that relation. We actually watch it every day. We watch an episode every day. It's the last thing we watch, my wife and I, before we go to bed. Yeah. We are now on the 4th run through of all the episodes.
Nice.
And I think we're in season 7 now in the 4th run through. So we don't splurge watch it or whatever they call it. Do it all in one weekend. We like to do like one episode, sometimes 2 a night. Yeah. And it just kind of sets the evening off. We sit next to each other. We're just laughing. I can even, almost half the time say the line that's coming up next. So at some point I'm like, why are we watching this again? But it's a way to relax. But it has I can see myself, I can see my friends, I can see my wife in all the characters. Friends was really neat, but I couldn't relate as well. That group. But I can relate to the people in Big Bang. And that's why I wanted to talk about it here. We talked about a TV show. Yeah. Because I think there's something. So I'm going to do another podcast. I was supposed to do it last night with a guy in Australia, and we had 3 movies we're going to talk about.
Oh, nice.
His daughter got sick, so we're rescheduling. But the same idea of what is it that intrigues you about a show? And that's what you were just asking. And it's because it relates to you, right? There's somebody will tell you, oh, you need to read this book or watch this movie. You'll love it. Well, then you start into it and you hate it because there's not something there that related with them and their story, but it doesn't relate with your story. So So I can always say, I really enjoyed this book for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
You ought to try it and see what you think.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I like it, and you're absolutely right. I liked it. I don't know when we came in on it. I think we were like, it was season 3 or 4 when we started to watch it. And the part I loved of it is that the kind of nerds they were, like they loved comic books. They loved, all that stuff. And I'm like, that's me. Like me and my friends just love some of the nerdy stuff. And so you're right. And I think, when I was younger, I used shows and movies to relate to life because like I was kind of, there's stuff going on in my house. So I was very isolated growing up. So like I would just watch TV and I made sense. TV shows made life make sense. And I love it's just like any other tool. It can be used well or it can be used not well. And how, a show brings you and your wife together in the evening. There's been shows that's inspired me to go out and do something. There's been, my wife and I also will watch shows at night, and just that time together, it's so nice, it's so magical. And seeing ourselves, and sometimes, it's like something will awaken in us. We'll see a character and be like, oh, that's me. I get it. And for me, that recently was Ted Lasso.
I've not seen that. I want to watch that.
It's very good because it was a really good representation of how I felt, where he's not a guy who's puffing his chest out and acting super macho. He's very team. He's very humble. And I'm like, he has panic attacks. And I'm like, oh, that's me. And it's
me. Yeah.
So it's so cool to have that. And so this is why I love doing the podcast, because it's just I love covering media, and also I love hearing other people's insight on it, because I always say my favorite music is seeing your favorite music through your eyes.
There you go. Yeah.
That is amazing. Like, just to see somebody else's view of the world is sacred. So
often we will watch a movie, we'll watch a TV show, we love it, but we never think about why we love it. And it's when you start breaking it down that you'll start understanding it and how it relates to you. Then you start learning more about yourself.
Yes.
And how you acted or reacted in your life. And that it's like a personality assessment, right? It gives you that greater understanding of yourself. So now when you go forward, you start to feel certain feelings, you can recognize them and even overcome them. Right? It's like being bullied in kindergarten, first grade. We were in married housing at Michigan State, and we had a bully, and he was always giving me a bloody nose. And finally, my dad was like, "You got to stand up to him," right? And he talked to me about fighting, and and he says, "You don't hit people unless they hit you first." Well, one time he came at me, and it was like I formed a fist, and man, I just and that was the last time he bullied me.
Yeah.
And now I'm watching Back to the Future Part 1, right? Where it's Michael J. Fox in his character. He's watching his father, and he's been bullied, and by can't even think of his name now. Came off the top of my head, but he's at the car, and he forms the fist and just had it, and he wallops the guy, and it changed their entire future.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, wow, isn't that interesting? There was a feeling there when I felt it the first time, but I had to explore it. Yeah. And I remember back to first grade when it happened to me. And my wife even says she had a situation like that. We had a common enemy in third grade, and she walloped him.
Yeah. So, sometimes we all need a good wallop, and that's right. That's awesome. I love that whole thought of just, I think it is so easy to move past a movie, be like, wow, that was awesome. That was awesome. Well, why was it awesome? What was it that you liked about it? And I know for me, one thing, so when my stepdad was diagnosed with leukemia, right after I watched an episode of Scrubs, where where Brendan Fraser is a guest star, and he's Dr. Cox's best friend, and he gets diagnosed with leukemia. and it was a two-parter. So I watched that one and I watched the second one. And the second one is all about Dr. Cox kind of bails because he gets scared. He's scared his friend is going to die. And I was like, that's kind of how I felt with my stepdad. I was scared. And I'm like he's been a huge influence on my life. Feels like a dad. And so that was scared. And I had the episode because later on he comes back, but he dies in one of the most emotional episodes of the series. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have this here when my stepdad passes away. Thankfully, I've not had to watch it yet, but just really meaningful. And so many people talk about comfort shows. And when you hear actors and stuff, they always talk about people came up and being like, hey, this helped me through a tough time, or this got me out of there. So I think there's so much more meaning out there. And I also like to think if there's meaning in TV shows, there's probably a lot more meaning in daily life.
Oh, yeah.
What we're seeing.
Right. That's what's so fun about being, humans are meant to be relational. So this whole piece about working remotely, working hybrid, not interacting at the office.
Yeah.
It's neat not to have to drive. When I joined Booz Allen Hamilton, I looked at my boss and said, when do you want me in the office? Every day. And he goes, no, you do it when it makes sense. If there's nobody here that you need to talk to, don't come in. So when I was working for 3 principals, when they were all off in DC or wherever, and my peers were gone out on their project sites, and I was going to sit in my office all by myself, I'd stay at home.
Yeah.
I remember one day I went to the gym. I came home at 7. I mowed the yard and trimmed the yard, cleaned it all up, got done about 8:25, and at 8:30 I got on a phone call. It's like, well, this is beautiful, right? I would have otherwise left at 7, sat in the traffic for an hour. To get there for the 8:30 meeting. Yeah. So it really allowed me some great time, but I had to go to work. And that's the piece that, when you talk about other things to cover as a career transition coach, like I talked about with understanding ourselves, is when you understand what things you need in life, right? I needed to interact with people. Right? I had to recognize the beliefs that I had coming out of the military, recognize the beliefs that I formed when I was in corporate, because each of those impact how I moved forward. Recognizing the things that I loved to do and didn't love to do, right? I was in college. The last thing I wanted to do was design structures. Didn't enjoy steel structures, concrete structures. I got a D in concrete structures. I did all right in steel, but I loved water and wastewater, right? So when I was getting out of the service after 27 years, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I went back to that. I don't want design. I don't want construction. I want environmental. That's where I shined. I shined because I loved it, because I would put the effort into it. I'd put the longer hours into it. I put the energy into it, right? Yeah. And I got that return back. So I did that with Booz Allen, and I did very well again. So I try to get people to realize that, because in the military, you just do what the boss tells you. And you do that a lot in times in the job. You just do what the boss tells you to do, and you don't recognize what really you get energy from and what you don't.
Yeah.
But when you get out of the service or you go to that next job, you will do better if you do something you really enjoy.
Yes.
That you don't have the Sunday scaries, I don't want to go do this, right?
Yeah.
And you get to the job, like, man, I got to work on this task today. I got to get this done. And you resist it all day. You'll find any distraction not to do it. Somebody walks in your office, you'll go to lunch for a long lunch just to get away from it. And then at 4:00, you have the reckoning, right? I got to get this done. I'm going to stay late tonight.
Yeah.
And you regret the work. You regret the leadership. But man, if you enjoy it, you'll work on it quicker. So I love helping people recognize those things because it gives them, I always say that I like helping people get the job that energizes them so they can get the life that fulfills them. Because when you're in that job that energizes you, you now go home with more energy. You engage with the wife and the kids more. You engage with the church and the community more. You're just a better person to be around. Yeah. And we should all be that way.
Yeah, exactly.
But surveys say that 82% of us are disengaged at work in some form or fashion. So people are regretting being there. And that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
That's awesome. That's so beautiful.
Besides, there's 22 military and veterans still committing suicide every day. And the number one reason, the number one ideation is career transition. They don't find the same purpose that they had in the military. They're looking for that same thing, and it doesn't exist. So you have to find something that's different and find something that energizes you. So
Yeah.
that's my summary.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that because, and I think too, a lot of people may not realize the jobs that are out there that can fulfill. Because for me, I would have been in peer support a lot longer ago if I knew it existed. Because I found like what I love to do. So like some of the people I worked with at my last management job, like the CEO won like 40 under 40, like top 40 entrepreneurs. My head of sales, who became head of sales at 25, she won like rising stars. And whenever one of them would win this just prestige award, I'd always go to them and be like, "Hey, Nettie, I heard you won this big award, but not to brag, but I just beat the Ender Dragon in Minecraft, and that's pretty hard." And just take like the worst thing to like brag about. But I also like to, because I feel like there's two sides. There's some people who just don't feel like they've accomplished anything and they don't feel good about themselves. And I'm like, hey, like your success, failures, like that's not who you are. I like you just the way you are. And same thing, like for people, I like to remind people who've done great things. And I'm like, I'm so proud of you. You've done that, but I don't like you because of that. I like you just the way you are. And that's what I bring to peer support specialists, people who have, they've made mistakes in their life. And to be here and be like, that's not you. It's been so fulfilling. And so totally relate with that. So and it seems like that's a good fit for you.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not what we do. We're not the title. We may be the accomplishments.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the task, but it's, I'm not, my personality, well, my worth is not being a career transition coach. My worth is helping people through that process.
Yeah.
But I can help people through a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And that becomes me as a server.
Yeah.
Right. I have to watch myself because I'm a people pleaser. I will take on tasks and get myself way over busy. And a lot of us are that way. So we have to be careful. But again, you have to recognize it.
Yeah.
That's the value of a personality assessment.
Yeah. Awesome. So many good things. I got quick 3 questions for you.
Okay.
So first question is, which clip did you think was funnier?
Oh, the first one.
Yeah.
The first one, just because I can relate to that more when people call me. And sometimes this is like, because I've got some people that are calling me for different things. Last week, there was a guy who was trying to sell me a logo. And boy, it just didn't feel right about the company and stuff. And finally, after the 3rd day, he had called me a couple of times. I got on there one time and he was trying to pressure me into doing business with him. I was like, dude, I'm not going to do jobs just because you pressure me, right? So finally, I asked the question, give me a testimony. So I talked to the person who gave me the testimony for, and that person said, no, that was a pain in the butt. They kept trying to upsell me. They didn't give me a quality product. I would not recommend them. Yeah. Like, dude, you gave me a testimony that you didn't, it was not even positive. Right. So I terminated the conversation.
Nice.
But I felt just like Leonard. So that's why I say the first one. Yeah.
It was a close one for me, but I like the second one, just like the facial expressions of people, because I read that really deep into it. I love like Leonard's Sheldon's little smile when Leonard gives him the look first and just all of that.
He's so proud of himself in it.
Exactly. The second question is, which clip did you think we got better conversation from?
I think it was the second one, just because the positive reinforcement gave us a little bit more.
Yeah. I agree.
So we just went down that path a little bit more. But,
agreed. And then final question, if we had to do a deep dive in one of these clips and just analyze every little part of it, which clip would you want to do?
It's almost like the favorite book or the favorite show, right? I'm going to go back to the first one, just because it related more with me. Yeah. And the feelings. I would be able to talk about it much longer. Yeah.
I would agree with you on that one. Is there anything else you want to cover or you feel like we missed?
What I'm going to do is I'll give you the information to connect with me. If somebody's out there thinking about changing job and they want to talk, I always give people that I'm on that hear me on a podcast free 30-minute consultation. So just let them know that have them let me know that they heard me here on this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
And we'll set up a time and talk and see
Yeah.
where it goes. Right. They will walk out of there with value no matter what.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll put that in the notes. And then I want to make sure we covered everything for where people can find you and what you want to
Mhm.
do. And so we'll put some stuff in the notes, but is
Okay.
there other ways people can find you or
So
anything else you want to promote?
So message me on LinkedIn through just a direct message. Don, middle initial L, and last name Gleason, Gleason, and I'm the only one there. There's like 65 Don Gleasons, but there's only one with the middle initial L. That's why I did it.
Nice.
And just send me a note and say, hey, we met here, and we'll talk. We'll go from there.
Yeah.
What I have for people who are thinking about transition is a guide. 4 key things you got to think about. And some of the things we've talked about tonight. In fact, just before we got on, I was working another one strictly on resumes. So trying to figure out ways to help people. So
Yeah.
if I talk to you and there's something I have that I talk to them, listener, there's something I have that I can give them value. I love to give that to them so they can move forward.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
awesome.
like people stuck.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think so many people get stuck. And
Mhm.
I one thing I'm going to say as well, I know sometimes when we listen to podcasts or shows, it's kind of like, oh, are these characters? This is the Don. What you're seeing is what the Don I got before we even started. Just this guy who's very approachable, very
Mhm.
kind. So, I mean, this is the Don you're going to get.
There you go.
Somebody, it's, I think
Thank you.
yeah, of course. I think for me, sometimes it's scary to go to like, to even think about going to like a
Mhm.
coach like that. But I felt so comfortable with you. And I think anybody who's,
Mhm.
willing to take that step, I think you're really going to like what you get from Don. So
Mhm.
I'm like, if I ever had somebody on here and I was like, oh, I don't like what's going on, I'd cut it.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that. I think this is something that's worth. So many people are stuck. So I think it's a beautiful thing you're doing. And I love that you get passion out of it too.
Yeah. I mean, here I am 65 here in a couple months and I see myself doing this for a while. And,
That's awesome.
I get a lot of people pressuring me. When are you going to retire? It's like, well, what am I going to do? Watch TV shows all day? I mean,
already doing what you love.
That's right. So, but I'm working it around a life where my wife and I go camping and hiking and bird watching, and we'll take
awesome.
long weekends at least once or twice a month. And I take some days off. Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to go up to I met this guy at the VFW in San Antonio. He brews beer. He's brewing beer every week, and he's getting ready to head to his summer house in Missouri, get out of Texas, and you have to drink all the beer he has. He's got to get rid of it before he leaves.
Yeah, there you go.
So he has a whole neighborhood party every May. So we're going to go up there and spend some time with people that I only see once or twice a year.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it's so cool, right? Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today. This was really good.
Of course. It was a sincere pleasure to have you on. This made my day. And I just appreciate you as a person. So
I appreciate that. Same.
Thank you.
Goes the other way.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.